I knew something was off the moment I pulled into my driveway and saw tire marks across the concrete. Big ones. I'm talking off-road truck size. I parked my sedan, grabbed my groceries, and walked around the side of my house only to stop dead in my tracks. Both doors to my garage were wide open. Inside, two massive black Ford Raptors parked like they owned the place. I stood there, blinking in disbelief. My name's Vaughn O'Connell. I'm a welder by trade, not the kind of guy to get rattled easily, but this was insane. I live in a quiet cul-de-sac in a neighborhood called Willow Ridge, not part of the HOA. I made sure of that when I bought the house 5 years ago. The homes across the street. They were under the thumb of the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association, run by a woman named Beverly Ashcroft, a walking stereotype with a bleach blonde bob, an ever-present clipboard, and a voice that could shatter glass. She and I had clashed before. She once came over to tell me my backyard shed was an eyesore. I told her politely that she had no jurisdiction over my property, and she stormed off muttering something about neighborhood harmony. But this was a whole new level. I set the groceries down and walked into my own garage, inspecting the trucks. Both Raptors were spotless, dealer tags still hanging from the mirrors. I looked around for a note. Nothing. I checked my garage keypad, still locked. That meant someone had used a garage opener. But mine was still in my car. I walked back outside and spotted Beverly across the street, standing with 2 other HOA board members by her mailbox. They were watching me. When I locked eyes with her, she smiled like she'd just won a lawsuit. I marched across the street. "Beverly," I said, keeping my voice calm, "why are there 2 trucks parked in my garage?" "Oh," she said, as if we were chatting about the weather. "Yes, that. Temporary situation. My nephew is visiting and we didn't have enough space on our side, so we used yours." I blinked. "Used mine." "Without asking. You weren't home," she said, shrugging. "And it's not like you're using your garage for anything important. I've seen it just tools and clutter." I pressed my tongue against my teeth. "That's trespassing." No, she said, waving her hand like that word was beneath her. "It's called community cooperation. You live in Willow Ridge. We all share resources." "I'm not in the HOA," I said, taking a step forward. "You have 0 authority over my property." "Well," she said, tapping her clipboard, "that's actually up for discussion." "What does that mean?" She handed me a piece of paper. It was a notice of pending annexation into the Willow Ridge HOA. I laughed out loud. "You're trying to force me into your HOA. We're expanding the jurisdiction," she said sweetly. The board voted. "We're including all non-HOA homes on this street. You can't do that without homeowner consent." She tilted her head. "Actually, the bylaws—" "I'm not part of your bylaws," I snapped. "You have no legal grounds to do any of this." Beverly's smile didn't budge. "We'll see about that. In the meantime, I hope you'll be a good neighbor and let the truck stay, just for a few nights." I turned around and walked back toward my house before I did something dumb. I needed proof, photos, footage, everything. And I had just installed a new set of security cameras last month that covered the garage entrance. 10 minutes later, I was inside, pulling up the footage. And there it was. Yesterday afternoon, Beverly herself, holding a universal garage remote, opening my door and directing the trucks in. She even brought a ladder to remove my security camera from the inside wall. But she didn't know I had backup cams mounted in the corner eaves outside. I copied everything to a USB stick and made a few calls. This wasn't just trespassing. It was breaking and entering. And I wasn't letting it slide. I didn't sleep that night. The USB sat beside me on the kitchen table while I sifted through county property statutes and municipal codes until my eyes burned. Every click took me deeper into the legal swamp Beverly thought no one would bother wading into. But I wasn't just anyone. I've done my own home permits before. I know how to read zoning language and navigate government red tape. Welding might pay the bills, but self-reliance keeps me sane. By dawn, I had a plan. First, I drove to the sheriff's substation down on Camden Pike. I asked for Deputy Laurel, someone I'd met a year ago when a neighbor's retaining wall collapsed onto my side strip. She remembered me. "Vaughn," she said, setting her coffee down, "you look like you've got a bone to pick." I placed the USB on her desk. "I've got footage of someone using a universal remote to open my garage and park 2 vehicles inside without permission. They also tampered with my cameras." She raised her brows. "Was anything stolen?" "No, but I didn't give consent." "They entered, removed a security device, and used the space for personal gain." "And you've got this on video, multiple angles, time-stamped. Audio too." She plugged in the USB and watched in silence. When Beverly's face filled the screen, arms flailing as she directed the trucks in like a valet, Laurel's jaw tightened. "That's a whole mess of violations," she muttered. "You want to press charges?" "Yes," she nodded. "I'll file a report and send someone over to verify the scene." "You should call your insurance too, just in case they try to claim liability if something happens to those trucks while they are on your property." As I stepped back into the morning glare, I felt the first flicker of momentum. Back home, the Raptors were still there. I noticed for the first time that both had dealer plates from a luxury auto shop 2 towns over. Strange. Why would Beverly's nephew be driving 2 brand-new, top-of-the-line pickups? I walked around both trucks, taking photos from every angle, making sure to get the VINs. Then I placed 2 printed notices on the windshields. Unauthorized vehicle on private property. Owner has 24 hours to remove or face impound. The notices weren't legally binding, but they sent a message. At noon, a patrol car rolled onto the cul-de-sac. Deputy Laurel stepped out with a clipboard, and a camera crew, 1 officer snapping photos of the garage and driveway while another took down my statement. That finally got Beverly's attention. She hustled across the street in wedge heels and a silk blouse like she was late for a garden party. "Excuse me, officers, this is a misunderstanding. I'm the HOA president here." Laurel didn't even glance at her. "Ma'am, please stand back. We're documenting a potential unlawful entry." Beverly's eyes narrowed. "This is unnecessary. My nephew's vehicles were placed there with good intentions." "We're expanding the HOA boundaries, and that's a civil matter," Laurel interrupted. "This is criminal. You entered a locked structure without permission and disabled security equipment. That falls under breaking and entering." "I had no intention of stealing anything," Beverly said, her tone turning brittle. "Intent isn't the issue," Laurel replied. "We're forwarding this to the county prosecutor." Beverly's mouth opened, but no sound came out. After the officers left, she made a beeline for me. "You didn't have to get the police involved," she hissed. "You didn't have to violate my property," I replied, locking eyes with her. "But since you did, I'm pursuing every legal angle I've got." Her demeanor darkened. "You don't understand how this neighborhood works." "No, you don't understand how the law works," I said. "And by the way, I called the dealer. Those Raptors, they're not registered to your nephew. They're listed under the HOA's business account." Her expression faltered. "Yeah," I said, reading her. "You used HOA funds to lease 2 trucks and park them on my land. That's fraud, Beverly." She turned without another word and stormed off. That night, I drafted a letter addressed to every non-HOA homeowner on the street, all 6 of them. I printed out copies of the footage, the bogus annexation notice, and the impound warning I'd posted. Then I stapled everything into a packet and went door to door. Kevin and Lauren, a young couple with a baby, were horrified. "She tried to tell me we owed back dues last month," Kevin said. "We never signed anything." "She's trying to strong-arm everyone into the HOA," I said. "But if we stick together, we can fight it." By the end of the night, I had signatures from all 6 non-HOA residents agreeing to form a legal neighborhood coalition. We weren't joining her, far from it. We were going to challenge her annexation attempt in court. The next morning, the Raptors were gone. No note. No apology. Just an empty garage and 2 oil stains on the concrete. I got a call later that day from a man named Eric Talbot, a municipal code officer at the county planning department. He'd received Beverly's annexation request and had flagged it because it was riddled with forged signatures. "She submitted a map claiming unanimous consent from your block," he said. "But your name and 5 others were falsified. We're launching an internal review." I laughed. "She's going to lose her mind." "She might lose her charter," Eric said. It wasn't just trespassing anymore. Beverly had used her position to forge documents, misuse HOA funds, and attempt to expand her authority illegally. By the end of the week, I received a subpoena to testify before the County Board of Ethics. I wasn't the only one. Kevin, Lauren, and 2 other neighbors had also been contacted. At the hearing, Beverly showed up in a lavender blazer with a lawyer who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. The board played the footage from my cameras. They reviewed the forged consent forms. They questioned the HOA's financial records and discovered that the Raptors had been leased for community security patrols, a fake program Beverly invented to justify using HOA dues for personal use. In less than 2 hours, the board voted to suspend Beverly from all HOA activities pending a full investigation. Outside the chamber, her lawyer muttered something about settlement options, but I didn't care. The damage was done back in Willow Ridge. Something changed. The clipboard disappeared. The passive-aggressive notes stopped. People who used to whisper their frustrations to me in private now waved from across their yards. Some even offered to help repaint my garage door, and the best part. A week later, the HOA's treasurer resigned, citing moral differences in leadership. That triggered a recall vote that dissolved the current board entirely. The new board. They reached out to me, asked if I'd consider consulting on a new set of bylaws that respected homeowner autonomy. I politely declined. I had a better idea. I used the footage, the forged annexation notice, and the ethics transcripts to file a civil suit for unlawful use of private property, and I won. The court awarded me damages for stress, unauthorized use, and repair costs. Enough to install a reinforced security system, repaint the garage, and take a week off. I spent it welding a steel mailbox post that could survive a hurricane, just in case Beverly ever got another idea. A week after the ethics hearing, I got a knock at the door just after sunrise. Not a neighbor. Not a delivery. 2 men in dark suits, badges on their belts, standing under the front awning with expressions like they'd already had this conversation in their heads 10 times before even knocking. I opened the door without a word. "Mr. O'Connell," the taller one asked. I nodded. "Agent Sloan, IRS Criminal Investigations Division. This is Agent Delaney. We're following up on a financial discrepancy involving the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association." I blinked. "IRS. We received a referral from the County Ethics Board after the forged annexation documents were submitted. There's concern about tax fraud, improper use of nonprofit status, and possibly embezzlement. We'd like to ask you a few questions about the vehicles that were parked in your garage." I let them in. They didn't waste time. Delaney pulled out a binder already filled with documents. Sloan flipped open his notepad. "You recognize this invoice?" Delaney asked, showing me a photocopy. At the top, it read, "Willow Ridge HOA Security Initiative Vehicle Lease Agreement." The signature line bore the unmistakable swirl of Beverly's name. Below it, a charge of almost $130,000 for a 2-year lease on both trucks. "That's the Raptors," I said. "They were parked in my garage without consent. That's how all this started." Sloan nodded. According to the dealer, the vehicles were leased using HOA funds under a fabricated security program. No such program was ever filed with the HOA's nonprofit charter. That's tax fraud. Delaney added, "We also found that the vehicles were insured under a separate LLC, Willow Ridge Strategic Assets. That company doesn't exist under state records. It's a shell." I leaned back in my chair. "She created a fake company to justify leasing luxury trucks with other people's money, then used my property to hide them." Sloan's pen didn't stop moving. "Exactly. They stayed for nearly 2 hours, asking about the timeline, Beverly's behavior, and whether I'd heard anything about new construction or contracts being moved through the HOA without public votes. I told them about a landscaping crew I'd seen working nights on the HOA park 2 blocks over. They made a note of it. 2 days later, I saw them again, but not at my house. I was returning from the hardware store when I passed the HOA's community center, a bland brick building with a sign that always boasted about upcoming events no one ever attended. Parked in front were 2 black sedans with government plates. Beverly stood on the front steps. Her arms were crossed, her lips pressed into a tight line, and 2 agents were escorting her to one of the vehicles. Word spread fast. By that evening, a neighbor from across the HOA boundary dropped off a copy of a local news article. The headline read, "HOA President under federal investigation for fraud, forgery, and corporate misrepresentation." I didn't celebrate, not yet. Instead, I focused on the next battle. The HOA board had been formally dissolved, but that didn't mean the danger was over. The charter still existed. The bylaws still offered loopholes, and some of Beverly's former lackeys, people like George Stafford, the treasurer who had resigned, hadn't vanished. They'd just gone underground. I formed the Willow Ridge Independent Homeowners Alliance. It wasn't an official organization. No dues, no meetings. Just a shared phone tree, a private email list, and a rotating watch schedule. We kept tabs on odd activity clipboard-toting volunteers, overnight landscaping trucks, survey markers that mysteriously appeared on fences. We documented everything. One night around 11, Kevin spotted someone placing plastic flags along the edge of his lawn. He called me, and I was there in 5 minutes. The man claimed to be measuring utility lines for a planned sidewalk extension. I asked for his work order. He didn't have one. I asked which company he worked for. He said Community Infrastructure Partners. I told him that company had been dissolved last year. He ran. We found out later that George Stafford had filed a zoning request under a fake civic group name to reroute a bike path down the non-HOA side of the street. His plan: once the county installed the path, he'd claim the land had been improved by public funds and use that to justify annexation again. It failed. The county council, still raw from the Beverly scandal, launched an audit of all zoning requests tied to Willow Ridge over the past 5 years. It uncovered a trail of shady deals, fake companies, and backroom agreements. George was fined, banned from serving on any civic board, and forced to repay a portion of misallocated funds. By then, I'd filed a formal petition to amend the neighborhood's zoning boundaries. With the help of a retired city planner who lived 3 doors down, we redrew the lines to clearly separate HOA-managed land from private property. The new map was certified, recorded, and posted online. Permanently, no more gray areas. No more pending annexation. No more fake flags. The Raptors? They were seized by the IRS, sold at auction. When I heard the final sale price just under $80,000, I couldn't help but laugh. Beverly had spent every ounce of her influence, every dollar of her neighbor's money, and every bit of her credibility to lease 2 showy trucks that ended up in a government lot wrapped in yellow tape. No one in Willow Ridge talks about her now. Her house went up for sale 6 weeks after the investigation wrapped. Rumor was she accepted a cash offer and moved out of state. The listing didn't mention the federal probe, the ethics violations, or the forged documents, just charming colonial with updated appliances and community charm. I made a new sign for the edge of my lawn. Welded steel, powder-coated, bolted to a concrete base. Subtle but clear. Private property not part of HOA trespassers will be filmed. People wave when they walk by now. Not out of politeness, but respect. They know the story. They know what happened when someone tried to take what wasn't theirs. And most of all, they know I won't let it happen again. I never thought I'd find myself sitting in a courtroom surrounded by oak paneling, fluorescent lights, and the awkward tension of people trying to act like this wasn't all absurd. But there I was, front row, wearing the only button-down shirt I owned that didn't have burn marks on the sleeves. The case was now in full swing state of North Carolina vs. Beverly Ashcroft, and I'd been subpoenaed as a key witness. What started as a simple trespassing complaint had ballooned into a full criminal proceeding involving wire fraud, forgery, and violations of nonprofit regulations. The IRS agents had uncovered a financial trail that pointed to more than just misused HOA funds. They'd found bank transfers to offshore accounts, shell corporations registered under false names, and a ghost landscaping company that billed over $50,000 for projects that never happened. Beverly hadn't acted alone. She had help. That came out during pre-trial discovery when her former vice president, a retired pharmacist named Lyle Benson, flipped. He provided email chains, bank statements, and voice recordings of meetings where Beverly instructed him and the treasurer to redirect funds and keep the board out of it. She'd even bragged about how easy it was to absorb the outer properties without resistance. None of this surprised me anymore. What did surprise me was how far the cover-up had gone. The Raptors, turns out they weren't just flashy toys. They were used in a scheme to inflate HOA assets for a fraudulent loan application. Beverly had submitted documentation claiming the vehicles were part of a new neighborhood patrol and infrastructure initiative, citing them as collateral for a $500,000 line of credit. She intended to use the funds to purchase a vacant lot adjacent to the neighborhood and build a private community clubhouse, one that she would personally manage and lease back to the HOA at a premium. That clubhouse never got built. But the money, it vanished. When I took the stand, the prosecutor walked me through the events. Mr. O'Connell, can you describe what you saw when you arrived at your home on the afternoon in question? There were 2 black pickup trucks parked inside my garage. I had not given anyone permission to use my property. Both garage doors were open, and tire marks were visible on my driveway. I later discovered my security camera had been removed from inside the garage, but I had exterior footage showing Miss Ashcroft directing the vehicles inside. Did you ever give Miss Ashcroft or anyone affiliated with the HOA access to your garage? No, I never consented to any use of my property. I'm not part of the HOA at all. And what was your reaction when you confronted her? I told her it was trespassing. She claimed it was community cooperation. Then she handed me documents about annexing my property into the HOA without my consent. The prosecutor handed the judge a printed image from my security footage, time-stamped and clear. Beverly's face was unmistakable, clipboard in hand, directing the trucks like a foreman on a job site. The defense tried to paint it as a misunderstanding, calling it a misguided attempt at neighborhood unity. But when the financial records hit the screen, dozens of transactions to accounts under names like WR, Strategic Holdings, and Civic Vision Investments, the jury didn't need much more. It took them less than 3 hours to return a verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge didn't hold back. Beverly was sentenced to 8 years in state prison with no chance of parole for the first 5. Lyle Benson received a lighter sentence, 2 years probation and community service due to his cooperation. But the real end didn't come in the courtroom. It came 2 weeks later, at a public town hall meeting. The county had arranged it to discuss the future of Willow Ridge's HOA, now that its leadership had been dismantled and its finances frozen. The remaining residents, those still paying dues and wondering where their money had gone, were furious. Many of them had never attended a single board meeting before. Now they were demanding transparency, accountability, and most of all, change. I wasn't planning to speak. But halfway through the meeting, someone asked about the non-HOA homes our side of the street. Whether we'd be willing to join a new, reformed version of the HOA under temporary county oversight. I stood up. I think I speak for all of us when I say we're not interested in joining any HOA, reformed or not, I said. But we're more than willing to help make sure this never happens again. If you want oversight, start with open books. Let people vote on every dollar spent, hire an independent accountant, and stop handing unchecked power to people with clipboards and a superiority complex. That drew a few laughs, even more nods. The county agreed to freeze any new annexation efforts for the next 10 years. A third-party firm was brought in to audit the remaining HOA funds and return misappropriated dues to residents. A new neighborhood oversight committee, not an HOA, was created to handle common space decisions, with rotating volunteers from all sides of the community. As for me, I got a call from the State Bar Association a month later. They wanted to use my case as a teaching example in continuing education seminars for attorneys specializing in property law and HOA litigation. Apparently, what happened in Willow Ridge had stirred up legal circles across the state. I gave them permission to use my footage and court transcripts, provided they left my name off the slides. A few weeks after that, I came home to find a package on my porch. No return address. Inside was a plaque made of brushed steel engraved with one line, "Private property means something." No one ever claimed credit for it, but I had a strong suspicion it came from a neighbor. The Raptors never came back. The HOA never recovered. Beverly's house eventually sold to a young family from out of state who took one look at the security system I'd installed and asked if I could help them set one up too. I did. Not because I had to, but because it turns out when you stand your ground against people who think they can take whatever they want, others start doing it too, and that's how you fix a neighborhood. One garage, one lie, and one very bad plan at a time.